gospel, light of the temple. Sword swing, killer live from the ghetto. The hood messenger, let them know hell's close. Black burial, the devil in a black cloak.
Yo, what is up? Welcome to the Street Gospel Podcast. I'm your host, Dave One. And this is episode number... Yo, Cam, what episode is this? 81. Episode 81. If you checked out our last episode, we had Adrian Harris, gospel cyclist on Instagram. Definitely was a good story, positive story, representing Whittier, which I didn't even plan it like this, but we got somebody else from Whittier here today. And I guess, Whittier has either totally bad people or totally good people or bad people that turn good. How about that?
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But definitely a good episode to check out, Adrian Harris. And then, like always, everybody check it out. Please subscribe. Go to YouTube. Check out Street Gospel Podcast, Street Gospel TV. Go on there. Subscribe to us. We'd appreciate it. We've gained a ton of followers on Instagram. We're just trying to get those followers to get on YouTube, get on Spotify, and subscribe to the channel. Do that. And if you hear something that you like, something you think would help somebody else, send that podcast to them, man. We'd appreciate that. Sharing is caring, and we love that. So check out the podcast, Street Gospel Podcast, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Spotify, on every podcast platform. But today we got a guest here, and I'm excited to have this guest. We are related now. It's just weird. You just start picking up family left and right, but we're related. Cousins, you know what I mean? Her husband was on the show. I mean, we've only had husband and wife once. Pastor Adam, Sister Carrie, and then Champ and his wife is here today. She is a believer. She's a mother, a wife to Champ. God bless her, man. God bless her. She's a business owner, a hairdresser, a woman of God is what Champ has told me. So, that's still debatable. No, I'm just kidding. But I want to welcome to the show Nicole Calvary.
Hi.
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 How do you like that last name?
It's great.
It's great, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, people probably still say, because that's not like a Mexican last name, even though our family is probably a good mix of a lot of different people, right? But we relate more. We're more Mexican. But when you say Nicole Calvary, they're probably thinking like, what is your husband like? Is he Indian, or what is your husband? Is white? Because Calvary is not a popular last name, but it's really not a popular Mexican last name.
For sure.
So, but do you like it?
I love it.
It kind of flows good. Nicole Calvary.
I love it. Yeah.
It goes good, right? Is it better than your last name?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything was better than that.
Anything was better than that? Okay, that's good. So, thanks for coming.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I mean, so I heard that so this is the thing. I was looking for guests. I'm always on the lookout for guests. And one day I was like, hey, what about Champ's wife? What about Nicole? I don't always call you Champ's wife. I do call you Nicole because I don't think that. But I was like, what about Nicole? And after I told Melissa, and I was like, hey, what about Nicole? And she's like, my sister? Because her sister named Nicole. I said, no, let's hear Nicole's story. No, I'm just kidding. We already know that story. But I was like, what? I go, Champ's wife. She goes, yeah, that'll be good. So I asked Champ. So I did the right thing. I'm going to ask Champ first. Hey, Champ, what do you think? He's like, yeah, right away. I go, yeah, like she could be on? And he's like, yeah. I go, okay, I'm going to ask her. So then I asked you, and you said yes.
And we're here.
Were you nervous about maybe doing a podcast?
Yeah, I'm nervous right now.
Well, why are you nervous? Let's just put it out there.
I don't know. I guess like that I've never really shared my full testimony. And I don't know, I guess just the setting in general, just not knowing the unknown.
The unknown. Yeah, I tell people all the time they come in here, they are what the crazy thing is they get here. I think getting here is like 90% of the fight, right? It's like showing up to church. I tell people when you're there, you're already there. like it's like the gym too, right? When you're at the gym, okay, I already made it. The hardest part's done.
Yep.
I got dressed. I drove over there. I'm in the gym. I might as well work out now. So this is kind of like that, right? The hardest part was driving. You guys got in a lot of traffic today. Is driving here, thinking about it, probably talking to Champ about it on the way up here, and going back and forth and saying, "Oh man, I don't know if this was a great idea," and then coming here. But when you finally get here, it's like the easiest part.
Yeah.
So
I will agree with that.
So where did you grow up at?
South Whittier.
South Whittier.
Born and raised, yes.
Born and raised in Whittier. So did you come at the tail end when like the white people were already moving out, or were they still sticking around a little bit?
It was me or my house, the corner house, and then one other house in that whole neighborhood that was white. And then by the time I was maybe 7 or 8, they were gone. So pretty much just me and my mom. And I was always the only white girl in school, pretty much. There might have been 1 or 2 other ones, but yeah.
So they were already long gone. Yeah, because I remember when we used to go to my Uncle Woody's house and Auntie Apples, and Champ was there, and it's a nice block. What was that street, Champ? Glen Street, man. I was like, man, this is like white people live over here, and they were over there all rowdy, living on that street, and everything. I was like, they don't belong here on this street. But it was a nice block back then. I don't know how it is now. It's probably not as great, but it was nice. So South Whittier, you grew up, and it's just you and your mom, no siblings.
No siblings.
So you're only child.
I'm an only child.
Like your son.
Like my son, yes.
What was that like growing up as an only kid? Were you spoiled? What was the deal there?
It was hard. My dad left when I was 4, and I just always felt different because all of my friends came from a 2-parent household with siblings. So it was very different. I was spoiled by my grandma, not so much my mom. My mom, obviously single mom, she was working at Ralph's, so not making tons of money, just trying to make ends meet. But I think my grandma would try to, go overboard to kind of,
Make up?
Yeah, make up for my dad not being there.
Did you know your dad at all, or?
No. So I remember, it's crazy because when I look back, like at 4 years old, you don't really remember much. Right. But I do remember the last day that I saw him, vividly. If I could draw, I would draw it out. And at the time, I didn't realize that would actually be the last time that I would see him. But when I got older, my mom told me, so he hurt his back at work, got addicted to drugs. She, after years of kind of dealing with it, basically gave him an ultimatum. They're driving to rehab. She basically told him, go to rehab or get your stuff and get out. So they're driving to rehab, and at a stoplight, he opens the door and was like, I'm not going. So she told him, pack your stuff and get out. So he left, and one of the last times, the time that I remember, was Father's Day. He had shown up at the house to see me, and he was drunk. And I remember my mom, blocking me at the door, not letting me leave to, run out to say hi to him because she realized he was drunk. And finally, when she let me out, I remember just running to him, and he kneeled down on the grass, and he was hugging me, and I felt weird. It didn't feel right. And then he left, and that was the last time I ever saw him.
Wow. Until
later on in life, I looked for him. But yeah, growing up my whole childhood, he wasn't there. He basically left and never came back. I never got a Christmas card, a birthday card, nothing from him.
Man.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say now, maybe, I don't know how old you are, but I'm not going to ask. But I would say now you run into more single parent households, probably more than ever in America, I guess. But growing up, single parent household, even 20 years ago, maybe, 25 years ago, it was kind of unheard of. And in decent areas where they had homes and people owned their homes, you would see 2-parent households. To grow up with one parent, it's tough. I mean, how tough was it for you growing up? I mean, as a kid, and just seeing and probably wanting a 2-parent household.
Yeah, it was hard. I struggled. And it seemed like my life kind of took a turn overnight. So he left. My mom at the time was only working part-time. She had to begin working full-time, which meant I had to go to a babysitter. So my mom would go to work early in the morning. She would wake me up at like 4:30 in the morning, drop me off at the babysitter. Then I would sleep for like an extra hour and a half at the babysitter. And then the babysitter would take me with her kids to school. I had to switch the school that I was supposed to go to stay with the babysitter's kids because my mom couldn't take me.
Wow.
So it was a lot. It was a lot. I spent most of my childhood either at the babysitter's house or my grandma's. And the time that I was at home, it was either early in the morning or at night to go to bed. I don't have a lot of memories in my house. You know, most of my childhood memories are in other people's houses. But I remember always feeling like kind of left out, like not a part of, because like that I didn't have my dad, I didn't have siblings, I didn't have that normal structure of being at home and having family dinners and taking family vacations. Like I didn't have that, you know? So I started struggling from a really young age, really young age.
It's crazy because I think you can grow up, like I said, you can grow up now and not miss that. You know, I've had people in here and they're like, I didn't know what a two-parent household looked like because my friends didn't have that either. So we all grew up the same. But when you grow up and you see things and you see like, oh, this is the way it's supposed to be, or they would say, I know like TV, they would watch TV and they say, mom and dad works, mom stays home, cooks. And they would see that and they say, oh, that's the way it's supposed to be. But sometimes you grew up and like guys are like, well, this is just normal. Like everybody grew up this way. But it kind of sucks when you can see like, no, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Like I'm the one that's different, right?
Yeah. I always felt like that, even in school. You know, even in school, a lot of my friends or siblings were there with them in school. And I didn't have that. And, you know, my mom missed almost all of my award ceremonies, all my sports banquets, my games. My mom was hardly ever there, you know, and I remember always like that, feeling left out. After a game, you know, that's the first thing you do is go to the crowd and go to your parents, and my mom was rarely there. So just from home life to school life to friends, I just always felt like I was never, I never fit in.
And then you're white.
And then I'm white in an all Mexican neighborhood. Yes.
So did you find anything that you gravitated to try to fit in, or were you one of these kids that tried everything to fit in?
I think I really shied away more than anything, especially like elementary, middle school. High school, I kind of started coming out of my shell a little bit.
Wait, you were shy?
Yeah, I was super shy.
Really?
Super shy, yeah. And my best...
I only say that because you're outgoing now. It's like, it seems like it's like, no, she's not that shy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't guess that.
Oh, yeah. I would, if you didn't talk to me, I was quiet. Like, there was no cracking me. But my best friend, the way that I met her, her mom babysat me basically my whole life. So my dad leaves, my mom gets a roommate to help pay the mortgage. Her daughter goes to this babysitter. So my mom's like, you know, pretty much like I said, overnight, I got to find somebody. So I start going to her. Well, the mom is one of 12 siblings, huge Hispanic family. Oh. Well, you put me, who has, you know, 5 people in my whole family, and I'm an only child, in that big family. And it was like I kind of had to come out of my shell a little bit. So that was the only time that I ever really talked or I would ever really do anything was with them, because I was forced to, you know, like Mexican family, there's no sitting in the corner by yourself being quiet. Like they didn't let you, you know. So I was grateful for that, for sure. To
have a secondary family a little bit.
Yeah.
And what type of mother did you have? I know she worked a lot and to provide, and I know you gave a pretty good speech about her at your guys' wedding, and she seemed like a really sweet woman.
Yeah, I love my mom. Obviously, just like anybody, we've had our ups and downs, of course, but one thing about my mom is she never said anything bad to me about my dad. I never saw my mom fold. She never cried. She never told me she was struggling. I never went without, you know, and even though physically she wasn't there, I knew at the end of the day, when I was going home, my mom was there. You know, like my mom was my backbone. And she still is to this day, you know what I mean? So I'm grateful, like, even though I didn't have my dad, I thank God every day that I had my mom, you know, because if I had a crappy mom, or let's say the circumstances were switched, I don't know how I would have ended up, you know? So, but I love my mom. She's the best.
So where did it go wrong for you? Because word on the word on the street. No, I'm just kidding. But that you know, you had some ups and downs there.
Yeah.
And it seemed like you had a good, even though your mom worked, even though your father left, you still had some good structure there.
Yeah, I did, and my grandma played a big part in that too. She was a school teacher, so she made sure I stayed in line with my classwork and stuff.
Because I get people in here, and they're I mean, to be honest, their whole life was rough. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, I see why you went left. You know, but what was it for you?
I think just it started obviously with my dad leaving, right, and just feeling that abandonment. And never really knowing how to express it. So just a lot of repressed emotion. And again, good and bad, but my mom never really talked to me about it, right? So I kind of grew up thinking it was me. Like, he's not here because of me. I'm not worthy of being loved, right? All my friends have their dads. I'm not worthy of that. My friends, you know, they have siblings and they have a big family, and I don't have that because I'm not worthy of that. So at a young age, I learned to feed myself that.
I think that's big, because I think you don't really think about that, you know, at the time. Maybe like years later, you're just thinking like, that's just the way it was. I'm not worthy. And then I think it's hard for parents to talk to their kids about that too, and really say, hey, it's not your fault.
Yeah.
Because they just want to, I think they just trying to get past it too, right?
100%. And I mean, obviously there's so much to share, but I was faced with that with my son, with his dad. And so I kind of went about it differently than my mom. And I don't blame my mom now, but for years I did. I felt like, you should have told me why he wasn't here. You know what I mean? I felt like it would have saved me a lot of heartache. But it is what it is, you know?
Do you think if she would have shared with you, hey, this is why he left, this is what happened, would you have been able to really fathom that? Let's say as a teen or something like that. Or it would have helped you a little bit understand?
I think so. Yes and no, because by the time I did find out, it was like I had already been telling myself for so many years the opposite. So then I didn't really know how to navigate through that. Like, well, wait a minute. You know what I mean? And then I would like, okay, he's not here because he's a drug addict. He's not here because he's unwell, right? And then later on, as a late teen, I paid money and found him. And, you know, he flies out here and it's a whole ordeal. And that's ultimately what led to my spiraling out of control.
What happened?
So prior to that, in high school, I started drinking and stuff, obviously. After that, in college, again, drinking, pot, cocaine, that kind of stuff.
Just experiment.
Yeah,
just
partying, right? Just being a young teenager, young adult.
Person.
Yeah. And then at this point, I was living in Huntington Beach with my boyfriend at the time. I was working for my uncle. And I remember just having this like burning curiosity of like, where is my dad? Right? I think I was like 19.
Are you wanting to find him to get answers, or just to see who he was?
Both.
Okay.
I think it was a little bit of both, because, you know, again, my whole life I'm telling myself one thing, my mom saying this, my uncle who actually used drugs with my dad confirmed what my mom is saying. So just really wanting answers from the source itself. So I was at work one day, I went on People Finders, I paid $50, and I mean, a stack full of papers was printing out of just every address, every phone number, every person that was ever associated with him.
Wow.
And so I remember just being overwhelmed, and I'm looking at this paperwork, and I literally just like random picked a number on there, and there was tons of numbers. So I pick a number, I call it, this lady answers, and she's like, oh, I know who you are. your dad is my son-in-law. He's at work. I'll have him call you when he gets home. So I'm like, okay. So he calls me. Long story short, after, a couple weeks of talking, he ends up flying out here. He was living in Utah. So I was 4 when he left. By the time I was 6, he had remarried and had twins. And I remember sitting there. We were in Huntington Beach by the pier. And I remember him sitting there and kind of blaming my mom for everything. Never owning up to his drug use, saying like, oh, I'm an alcoholic, but I never had a drug problem. Keep in mind, half of his mouth is his teeth are missing. So I remember just sitting there even more confused now because I'm like, what the heck? Like, why fly all the way out here and lie and blame my mom? And then
almost regretting it now.
Yeah. And then it really hit me where I'm like, so 2 years after you leave, you remarry, you have these kids, you have a job, you have a home, you're providing, you're there physically and obviously financially. I can't say emotionally because I don't know what kind of dad he was to them.
But you can't take care of me, but you could take care of these twins.
Yes. And obviously being, a young adult, not having the maturity to even kind of work through that, it sent me in a tailspin. And I remember it was like a week or 2 after that, the boyfriend that I was living with, I found out he cheated on me. So I felt like those 2 things, that heartache that I was feeling for the first time really in my life, I went off the deep end, So at that point I was in cosmetology school. I was drinking a lot. That's all we would do, right? You go out after school, we would drink in class.
Dang, jacked up haircuts.
Yeah, it was all bad. But yeah, I remember just.
I think most people don't understand. I don't. I understand that a death of a parent, right? I think, but to not have a parent, it's almost like they died.
Yeah.
Right. It's almost like they're dead.
Yeah.
I mean, and to see them and hoping to get some answers or some closure, and it to make it worse is compounding the issue.
Totally.
Right? I mean, it just makes the issue 10 times worse because now you don't have the answers you were looking for. At least you don't have no closure, and now you're probably more pissed off than ever. Like, why did you come over here? And right.
I remember being full of just a lot of anger. I had a lot of anger. And a lot of anger with myself, too. Like, why did you even do that? It was like ripping the Band-Aid off of an old wound, and it's just wide open, and he's just piling more stuff into it, But, yeah, that was really the turning point for me. Like I said, I was partying a lot in cosmetology school. This all happened, I want to say, around, in the summertime, August, September. And then that October, I was at a party for one of the girls from my cosmetology school, and I was jacked up. I mean, I was doing coke, I was drinking, and
do you just not care?
I didn't care, and it was like, all bets were off at that point. I didn't have anything to lose really, so I was at a party, and I remember just being so out of control and just spinning all around. And that was the first time that I was ever raped, was at that party. So I felt like all of those events happening kind of back to back, it put me in a really messed up place. I suffered from an eating disorder for, at this point, probably 8 years or so. I had already been in rehab for it once, so I was just drinking, throwing up, just anything to not feel what I was feeling inside. And then I'm putting myself in situations where I'm ultimately causing myself more harm. And so then that comes the bigger spiral. It's like all these things already happening, and then I'm putting myself here and more things are happening. So then I keep going to these places.
What is it what is that? I mean, I for everybody out there, it's hard to, people say why don't you just stop doing drugs? Why don't you get help? Well, you got sexually assaulted. What's your fault? Mm-hmm. I mean, what is the reality for everybody that says that out there? It's not that easy, right? It's not that. No. It's not like I wanted that in my life. I know I was making poor decisions, but I mean, people think it's just easy spiral to unspiral out of, right?
Yeah, and it's actually the opposite. Because I look back and, like I said, it became like a snowball. So one little event would happen and then another little event and another, and pretty soon it's this huge thing and you feel like you can't escape it, like you're trapped, and ultimately it was like I'm being betrayed by every man that I encounter, including my own father, So at this point, I'm full of rage. I hate men. I hate myself at this point. Just spiraling like that, And then I remember I was at a bar one night in Anaheim, and I met up with one of my girlfriends. I wasn't even 21 yet, but they would let us in there. And there was this guy there, and he started, flirting with me and whatever. And so he was a bouncer at another bar down the street. And so we all kind of started going there here and there. And then it was New Year's Eve that year, which I don't even remember. I want to say 06, somewhere around there. We had gone out, and after that, we went to a trailer park at one of his friend's house. At this point, it's like 3 a.m, and I'm drunk. They're passing around a pipe. I don't even ask what it is. I just start smoking it, right? Well, it was meth, and I had no clue. And when people tell you that is the devil's drug, that is the devil's drug. Like, I had no clue what it was. I had no clue what it was going to do to me. Everybody was doing it. I was already jacked up. Give it to me, and I smoked it. And from that point forward, for like 3 years, I was addicted on the streets, in cars, doing drive-bys with different gang members, in and out of motel rooms. I mean, I lost everything, because of that one night. And because I never dealt with my abandonment issues with my dad and all the things that led up to that, it was just on, and I mean, so much happened over that time.
Somebody's described meth to me that you do it the first time, and every time after that, you're trying to get to that high again, but you never get there again.
No. And I remember the first time I smoked it, obviously, and then, I don't know, I want to say for maybe 3-4 months, I would just smoke it. And my ex at the time, he would do meth and heroin. And so he would inject himself in his neck or have me inject him. And I remember one day he was like, do you want to slam it? And I'm like, okay. Again, I'm one of those, like, just whatever's going to do the job, do it, And so he injected me, and that high in itself is something that I've never experienced, and I was constantly chasing that high. Once you do that and then you go back to smoking, it's like, what is this? You know what I mean? But it's weird because in that, even though you're around other people that are smoking it or whatever, the only time you could really like inject it is with another person doing that. Like, it wasn't like you show up at a party with your syringe, like everybody passes a pipe, so you do, you smoke the pipe. But I remember that first time and just constantly chasing that, that high.
Oh, so you start getting high, and that's taking you to a whole nother level. Are you a functioning drug addict? No, you're just...
No, I don't. I have such a hard time with that. Like, even with my husband, when he tells me stories, I'm like, how did you go to work like that?
Yeah, because he was totally opposite. He's working, paying bills, doing his thing, and I didn't even know. I'm thinking, I'm seeing him, and hey, cuz you're still working? Yeah, good. Okay, he must be doing good. He's still working. I know he's partying, but he's still working, so he must be fine. But when he tells me the stories too, I'm like, how are you doing that?
Yeah, I cannot relate to that at all. Like I said, that first night that I smoked in that trailer park, from that day forward, I mean, little by little, I lost everything. I didn't go to work after that. I was literally on the streets, motel to motel.
And what is your mother saying now, and your grandmother? Are they telling you anything? Are they seeing this? Or are you kind of keeping it on the low away from them?
Well, my mom knew. Obviously, she caught on it at some point. And it got so bad, like, I would break into her house when she was at work, and I would take stuff. I would take her money. I would take her jewelry. I would take some of my stuff.
So you were down there.
I was bad. And it got to a point, further on where she changed the windows. She bolted the garage. And she told me, like, don't come back to my house until you're ready to get help. So I stayed away. But it got so bad. I mean, there's just so much that happened over the years, but it got so bad to the point where I was in Watts. Again, white girl, right? Bleached blonde hair in Watts.
Oh my gosh.
And at that point, I was really bad, really, really bad. And so 2 weeks had gone by where she hadn't heard from me, hadn't seen me. And so she filed a missing persons report with Whittier PD. And when I finally got clean and she told me that, and then obviously now being a mother, like, that breaks me, like, thinking you don't know whether your kid's alive or dead, in prison,
wow,
held up in some, you know what I mean? She had no clue where I was. And for 2 weeks, like, I can't even imagine what she went through.
After going through what she went through with your dad and seeing that, and it's got to be like, what?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah. So
and how old are you during this time?
It was from the time I was like 20 until 23, 24 when I got clean. So
you were still fairly young.
Yeah. And I thank God for that. You know what I mean? I thank God for that. And looking back in retrospect, like, even though it was only a few years, like, when you're talking about that life, like, there's a whole nother world out there, you know what I mean? That's so evil, and second to second, like, you don't know what's going to happen, And I mean, I've had guns to my head. I've been raped. I've been beat. The whole 9 yards, everything you could think of, I've pretty much gone through on the streets, and making it out of that and being where I'm at now, that's just proof of God's grace, because in and of myself, I couldn't ever stop. I remember trying so hard, like, okay, I'm not going to get high today. I'm not going to get high today, or be on like a bender for 5 days, and like finally waking up like, okay, today I'm not going to get high. And I couldn't do it.
What is being on a bender? What was that for you?
I brushed my teeth a lot, so that's a big one. A lot of people are like, I don't understand, like, how were you a tweaker but you still have all your teeth? I would, like, brush my teeth a lot, put makeup on, be up literally for 5 days because I would slam it.
5 days?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just crazy, and it just depended. Like, when I first started out with the guy that originally got me hooked on it, he was from Stanton, so we spent a lot of time in Anaheim, that whole area. And then once he got busted, he was a two-striker. So when he got busted, then I just kind of shifted my circle, you know what I mean? And I just moved to a different group of tweakers. And then I was in La Habra, Whittier area. And then from there, I ended up in Watts. And then after Watts, I was back in Whittier. And then that's ultimately from there when I got clean.
How much was your habit per day?
Oh, God, I don't even know.
And how do you afford that? Any way possible?
Yeah, any way possible. When I first started, that guy that I was with, like I said, he was a bouncer at a bar. And so he would steal money from that bar left and right. He would have the girls pay him instead of the owner. Just scandalous,
wow.
And then at that point, when I first started, I was on unemployment. But yeah, just stealing stuff, selling stuff, the whole 9 yards.
And you're doing drive-bys?
Yeah. Well, not me, but I was in the car. Yeah.
How do you get mixed up with that?
Different neighborhoods. Yeah. It was pretty crazy. Like I said, when I look back, I'm like, if God's hand was not on me, I don't know what else, because the situations that I was in is it's just crazy. It's crazy.
And then where was the change for you when you finally said, this has got to stop?
It's crazy. I was literally 2 blocks away from my mom's house, which my whole time doing drugs, I was never really near my mom's house, right? For multiple reasons. But the last dealer that I was getting from was 2 blocks from there. I had been in that garage, God, for like 2 weeks. At this point, I had no car. I had nothing. I had blisters all over my feet. I couldn't even put my shoes on because I had blisters. And I remember I was the only girl in that garage, surrounded by gang members. And I remember sitting there, and I had my headphones on, and I was listening to Pink and that song Sober. She had just released it, right? And so I'm sitting there on this folding chair in this garage, and I just broke out in tears. And I didn't grow up in church, right? The first time I ever even knew who God was, my uncle had got out of jail. And so I remember in that moment, never really praying before in my life, never really having a relationship with God, right? I had been to church with him and whatever, but in that moment, I was so desperate. And like I said, in and of myself, I could never get clean. I couldn't stop, but I was so tired physically, emotionally, mentally. I was done. And I remember my mom's words, like, don't come back to my house until you're ready to get clean. And I'm listening to this song and I'm crying. And I remember just praying, like, God, help me, help me. And looking back, you know, and in that moment, I didn't know what it was. But now looking back, it was the Holy Spirit, right? And it just came over me. And I picked up my Reeboks. I got my backpack. And I walked out the side door of that garage. And I didn't say anything to anybody. And I walked to my mom's house. I knocked on the door and I was like, I'm done. She packed a suitcase. And we literally went to Pasadena and I never went back.
Wow.
But in that moment, like, God met me where I was. You know what I mean? And it's just so crazy because that's all it took. That's all it took. All those years of me fighting with my flesh, all it took was me being like, God, help me. And he's like, done. Let's go. You know, because there was no way I could pick up my shoes and my backpack on my own before. There was no way, you know.
I think the crazy thing about that is that we always think that you have to have a mother that knows God, or people are constantly telling you about God, and that's that's how he's going to touch you. And you didn't have no experience with God, no connection at all. And you just felt in your heart to cry out to him, I need help.
Yeah. And
he answered your prayer. And I think the biggest thing about that for me, for people, especially that listen to the podcast, is like, it works.
Yeah. Yeah.
It truly works if you call upon his name and say, hey, I need help, and you're sincere and you're just like, I'm done. I think that's the biggest thing for me, because I think people think it has to be something. You're in a garage with a bunch of gang members doing their thing, and he comes all the way down and meets you where you're at.
Yeah. And like I said, all those years, I think back, like, if I would have done that from the very beginning, what would have happened, but it is what it is now, and I'm grateful. But, yeah, I remember my uncle, he got out of jail for the last time. I was like 12, I think. And, he got saved when he was in jail. Nobody really knows what happened, what led him to that place. But he was out there too. And, he had a daughter the same age as me. And so on the weekends, like when he would get her, he would go to church and he would pick me up. And so that was the first time I had ever even been in church. And I remember, it's ironic, but we were crossing the railroad tracks right by where my husband and I have a house now. But he had on Crystal Lewis. And music, I always say, has gotten me through some of my darkest days. And I remember being little and just loving worship music. And so I remember he ejected it out of his Corvette and he gave it to me as a cassette. And, from there, little by little, I would go with him to church. And then later on, my mom started going to church. So that's kind of the only encounter that I ever really had. But yeah, in that moment, in that garage, like, it was like my spirit knew, like, I have to cry out, you know? And it's crazy because it's hard to explain to people unless you've actually had that encounter, right? It's something that you can't ever really put words on. It's supernatural. Like I said, like I was so broken and so alone, and there was no way in me that I would have ever picked my stuff up and walked home. I couldn't do it. You know, even though I was so close, I couldn't do it. It's
so crazy that you mentioned the encounter. You know, so many people in this podcast talk about the encounter and how important the encounter is. And we've talked about it, you know, with Champ and Los and these guys that never had the encounter as kids being around church, and how important it was to, like, man, I finally had the encounter. And so many times I tell people, you have to have the encounter with God. You really have to have that connection. Like you said, you can't explain it, but you know when it happens.
Yeah.
And I tell people, make sure if you're taking your kids to church, they have their own encounter with Jesus. That's just not you grabbing, taking them, and this is what we do. No, They need to make sure that you have your own encounter, and because the encounter stays with you. It always does. Everybody that's had Melissa talks about the encounter when she was a kid, and when she fell away when she was a teenager, she's like, I always had a little voice in my head when I was doing bad or wanted to do bad, small, maybe not as loud as, you know, a saved person is, but just a little something in the back of my head, because she says she had the encounter, and it stays with you.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree with that. It's something, and for everybody it's different. And everybody, some people it's instantaneous, boom. Some people it's a process. You said you went to Pasadena, and did you go to rehab? And was it a process for you, or was it an instantaneous change?
I would say a little bit of both. So it was instantaneous in the fact of, like, that, just reaching out and getting help in general. That was like a, you know, obviously instantaneous. We drove to rehab. I went to an all-girls rehab. And from there, that's when the process kind of began, you know, and I started to really dive into why I was doing what I was doing, and really uncovering just the things that I had been masking pretty much my whole life, you know, and sitting down and getting raw with the therapist, getting raw with the other women that were in the house with me, and just allowing God to come in and just kind of work on me, you know.
How important is that, though? Like, I think people, even though they got change, right, and they get off drugs, or they start a new life, you still have to encounter the problems, right? You still got to face those problems head on, right? How hard is that?
100%. Super hard. And I always tell people, getting off the drugs, that's the easy part, right? Not going back to the drugs, that's the hard part. And you not going back is going to depend on, one, your relationship with Christ, and two, you doing the work, right? Like, a lot of times we expect God to just come in and miraculously just take everything from us. Like, no, he wants to see you do the work. How bad do you want this? You know what I mean? How bad do you not want to go back to that life? Okay, well, let's work on the reasons why you did that to begin with, you know? And it was,
because the easiest part is getting saved.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the after part that's, you got to face it. You got to wake up every day. You got to pray. You got to read. You got to live right. You got to do what's right. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
Getting saved is, like, easy.
Yeah, exactly. And just like you were saying too about coming here, going to the gym, going to church, right? Going to rehab. Yeah, it was tough, you know, getting there and stuff. And once I was there, I was like, okay, finally. Right. But then it hit me. I was like, oh, wow. Like, I had my work cut out for me, you know? But I did 90 days inpatient, and then I did 6 months sober living. I became a sponsor and was sponsoring other women.
Which is tough, because a lot of people don't last, right?
Yeah.
They might do 90 days, but sober living is a whole nother, especially for 6 months.
Yeah.
People think they could just, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
What made you stay so long?
I think I was scared. I had a counselor in there. I'm still friends with her to this day. But she was from a neighborhood, La Puente, And she would always tell me, like, Mija, you can't go back to the same neighborhood that God pulled you from, right? And I'm like, yeah, but I've been in, like, every neighborhood. Like, just because I live in one of them, yeah, where am I supposed to go, you know? But I understood that because literally my drug dealer was 2 blocks away from my mom's house. And so I had that fear in me, like, I can't go back there because I'm going to use, you know, I'm going to relapse. And my mom, God bless her, she... the sober living that I stayed in, it was still part of the rehab, but they had built a new facility and it was cash only. They didn't take insurance. And so my mom literally paid the first month cash and then like refinanced her house to keep me in rehab or to keep me in sober living.
So your mom's a real one.
Oh yeah. She's a ride or die for sure. But yeah, and so I think when I did finally leave sober living, it was bittersweet, but I was ready. How did you know you were ready? I wasn't really scared anymore. Like I said, I wasn't really scared. And I remember just having the tools, you know, that I had gained from being in there, and still being able to go back. And like I would go back to Pasadena like 2 or 3 times a week for meetings and just see people. So I did that for a while, you know, just staying connected. So.
And then you became a sponsor.
Yeah, I was a sponsor.
What was that like?
You know, it's just like church, like taking somebody under your wing and discipling them. It's kind of the same thing, you know?
Okay, so I do that. And sometimes it's frustrating. Sometimes it's a letdown, right? You're like, man, and you almost feel like you failed this person sometimes because they make mistakes or make the same mistakes. I mean, did you run to that? Like where you're just like, it's tough being a sponsor, man. It's just, you have to have a different mindset, right? You got to get a mindset of, I'm going to help this person and they're going to fail and I'm just going to keep helping them. Because what is the rate? There's like a rate, right? For relapsing, right?
Yeah, it's very high.
It's high, right?
Very, very high. Yeah, and in fact, my first sponsee, she did relapse multiple times. But I think I saw so much of myself in her. And it's funny, you know, God will put people in our path that just, I don't know, you just have a heart for them, you know? And
you see yourself in them.
Yeah, there was a lot of moments like that where I would be like, what are you doing? You know? But I had to allow her to have her experience, you know, and just be there for her and guide her. And so, but yeah, it's definitely not for the weak.
Okay, so then you became a mother.
I became a mother, yes.
To a son. A little hooper.
Yeah.
Right? Thinks he's going to be in the NBA, I hear.
That's his goal.
But that seems to run in our family. There's got a couple cousins in our family that want to be hoopers. Of course, I was one of them, but that dream was long gone. I can't even play no more. But how did you become a mother? Well, I know how you became a mother, but you don't have to tell me the details.
So I actually met my son's dad while I was in rehab. He was a sponsor. He was in the program too.
Which is a no-no, right?
It's a big no-no.
Okay.
Big no-no.
All right.
So at the time
I watch Intervention, that's why.
Oh, okay, so you know.
Just kidding.
At the time I was still inpatient. And Friday nights we would have a Cocaine Anonymous meeting that outsiders were allowed to come. So there was men on the property. Again, we're in all girls rehab. So you see any man walk in and you're like, whoa, there's testosterone in here, you know? And I remember I saw him and I was just like, oh, he's cute, you know, whatever. And he had a girlfriend at the time. And so flash forward, I get out of sober living and he had broken up with her. And so I think we had run into each other at a meeting somewhere. It was in that whole group. We started hanging out, dating little by little. And I remember I got to a point where I was like, I don't want to be with him anymore. You know, I was kind of over it. And like a month later, I went back to his house. I got a new car and I thought, oh, I'm going to show him my new car, which is so stupid. When we had sex one time and I got pregnant. But the crazy part was when I first moved home from sober living, I ended up having to have emergency surgery. So I had two cysts on my right ovary and another cyst on my left. Long story short, I ended up having this surgery. And the doctor at the time was like, I know you're still young and you're not thinking about it, but the odds of you getting pregnant are very slim because she had to like cut into one of my ovaries. Okay, I'm like, at the time I'm 24, I think, 25. And literally 8 months later, I get pregnant without wanting to or trying, right? Again, God's will. And so I remember at that point, I'm like, great, I don't even want to be with this guy, but I'm pregnant. So I kind of went back and we tried to make it work. I had Gavin. And at this point, he was like, my ex was like 8 years clean and sober. So he had a lot of time under his belt. He was working nights, and obviously I started working during the day. So we rarely saw each other. It put a big strain on the relationship. And, I remember at one point I had gone out with some of my girlfriends just for like girl time. And something that night told me like, I need to check his phone. So I ended up checking his phone, find out he's cheating on me. It was a whole ordeal. So I'm left here with this baby, you know, and shortly after that, he ended up relapsing on meth while he was in my house watching my son.
How does that happen?
It was pretty crazy.
I'm asking, like, because the regular average person like myself that's never done drugs, and we think, okay, guys, 8 years clean. How do you fall back into that?
Yeah, it was really hard for me to like wrap my head around.
That's a long time, right?
It was a long time. But I remember at this point we weren't together, but for babysitting purposes and to save money, I was like, you know, two times a week, you come on your days off, stay here with him at the house, and I'll go to work and I come home and you leave, right? Just to save us a couple days of babysitting. And that morning he showed up, and I remember he was totally avoiding me. He wouldn't make eye contact with me, and I thought something's weird. I felt off. And I knew at that point he had started drinking, right? I didn't know how heavily. Whatever. So I go to work and I'm sitting at work and it was like lunchtime, and something in me was like, I have to go home. I just felt it. And so I walked in the house, and I will never forget this. My son, he wasn't even 2. He was standing up at the coffee table, and there was juice boxes spilled all over the coffee table. Like he had just gotten into everything. The back door's wide open. The water hose is filling up his little pool. My son was obsessed with water at this point. And I'm looking around and I'm like, where is Raul? Like, where is he? And I hear him talking, and I'm like, what the heck? And that morning I had locked my bedroom door because I'm like, he doesn't need to be in my bedroom. There's no point, you know? So I'm walking down the hallway and my bedroom door's open, and I'm like, he broke into my bedroom. So I'm standing in the doorway, and he's on the phone with somebody, talking to somebody. And all of a sudden he turns and he looks at me, and his eyes are like this big, just black. So I knew in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, he's high. And he's been home with my son, you know?
Scary.
So all these things, yeah. And I remember being terrified. I was terrified to say anything to him at that point, because it was like I was looking at the devil himself. Like, it was scary. So I grabbed my son, I went outside, and I called my uncle, and I was like, you got to come over here because I don't know what to do. He's in my house. He's rummaging through my room. I'm terrified, you know? And from that day forward, it's just been a nightmare with him. So, to answer your question though, I don't know how you go from being clean and sober that long and having a family to going right back to that. You know, it's hard.
Did you ever get to a point after you're sober where you thought about it?
Yeah. So I ended up drinking after that. So I went through all that with my son's dad. He literally put me through hell. I ended up having to go to court, get full custody. I will never forget that day. I was like so scared. I was by myself. I had nobody with me, no support. Had no clue what was going to happen. And at that point, I was working in an office, a construction office. And, you know, the girls would go out, have drinks here and there, no big deal, you know. And I would always tell myself, well, I have a problem with meth. I don't have a problem with alcohol. And so little by little, you know, over the years,
That's a lie, right?
it's a big lie that I bought for years, you know, because that's the way of the world, you know. As long as you're not doing drugs and you're just drinking, it's fine. Everybody does it,
Yeah.
you know.
Baby steps in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and ultimately, like, that's what led to my actual, like, complete surrender to the Lord was my alcoholism. But that was the start of it, was going through all of that with my son's dad. Again, feeling that, like, I had no control, right? And now I have this little boy that I have to take care of and be there for on my own, you know.
How was your experience with your mother affecting you being a single mother?
Big time. I look at my mom now and I'm like, she's an angel, because I mean, like I said, I never saw my mom cry. I never saw her mad. Not at the situation, you know. She would get mad at me, of course, but she never talked bad about my dad. Like, just a good woman, you know. And ultimately, going through all of this with my son's dad, he ended up getting clean and sober. My son was like 5. And so little by little, he started to see Gavin again. And then 2020, he relapsed really hard again. And at this point, Gavin's older. He's not little. When he was 1.5, he doesn't remember that.
Now he knows.
Now he knows. So now I'm faced with the same situation that my mom was ultimately, right? Like, your dad is on drugs. He's not here. I don't know if you're ever going to see him again.
So now all the things that you wish your mom would have done for you at that age, now are you doing that for Gavin?
Yeah. So I remember praying and just asking God, like, what do you want me to do? You know, and I just felt in my heart like I have to be honest as I can with him, right? At this point, he's 8. Yeah, like 7, 8 years old. And, you know, he started questioning things like, where is my dad? Why isn't he here? And he witnessed a lot of stuff with his dad. And I remember just being honest with him, like, you know, your dad has a problem and we got to just pray for him. And I remember just instilling that in him, like, let's pray. And Gavin ultimately went through a little rough patch too. He started acting out in school. I had the principal calling me like, hey, what's going on with him? This is not like him, you know? So he ended up having to see the school psychologist like twice a week for pretty much like a year, that whole school year, which really helped him. And that's why I put him in basketball, was to just kind of get his focus off of his dad and just focus on something positive. We started going back to church, and I will never forget, I was on the 605 freeway with him coming home from work. And this was like during COVID time, so I don't think they were in school yet. So he was with me at the salon. And he was like, Mom, I want to find my dad. And I was like, okay. You know, I'm like sitting there thinking, like, what do I say to this? And he's like, I want to tell him about Jesus. And I remember in that moment thinking, like, yes, you know, like, I don't want him to have that resentment and that anger that I had, which ultimately led me to doing so many bad things, you know. I don't want that for him. And so I constantly would tell him to, like, pray for him. And Gavin, like, what he's doing isn't because of you. He loves you. You know, your dad he has a lot of issues from when he was little that he hasn't dealt with. And that's the truth, you know. So I've tried for years to just be really open and honest with him. And I pray to God every day that helps, you know, that it keeps him away from wanting to seek other things outside of that and outside of God, ultimately.
Yeah, I wanted to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by Elevate Ministries. Elevate Ministries is an authentic, passionate, and innovative church in the heart of Orange County, California. They strive to make their services welcoming and encouraging by intentionally engaging you in all senses to stimulate a spiritual hunger. If you're looking for a great church that's on a mission to change the world one person at a time, I encourage you to check them out at www.elevateministries.com and on Instagram at Elevate Ministries. Yeah, I think when we talk about God and faith and believing. I like what you said, how you got counseling, how you got counseling for your son. And I think sometimes we don't think it's like, we think it's like a taboo type of thing, right?
Totally.
And especially when we're believers, right? I had, Vanessa in here, she's a professional, that's what she does. And we talked about the same thing, and how people don't get help for those things. We just think that, we can just serve God, which he's going to help us, but we have to still do the work. But faith without works is dead. So we have to get help for those things and address those things in our life. Because we don't address those things, they end up coming back. It's like burying alive stuff, One day it's going to become unburied because it's not dead, And so I think that's great that he did that, and that you recognize that right away. Like, this has got to be different now. We've got to change the course here. We're in the same boat, me and you, son, but now we have to change this a little bit, and with the Lord's going to help us.
Yeah,
that was great.
Yeah, and ultimately having those conversations with him. I remember when it all first started happening, I was breaking for so many reasons, because a little girl in me could identify with the little boy in him, right? But now I'm his mom too, right? And so having those conversations and teaching him that no matter what he's dealing with, no matter how he feels, whether it's anger, whether it's pain, sadness, like, take that to the Lord and he will help you, like, all of that can be removed, and I remember one day just thinking, because my son's dad didn't have his dad either, right? So we were two broken people trying to raise this baby. Yeah. But I remember one day it just clicked, where I was like, you know what? Every generational curse, it ends with my son. He will never abandon his children. He will never have children outside of marriage. All of that is gone. And it's stopping and starting with my son, and I truly, in my heart, I believe that. And I felt like the Lord put that on my heart to give me that reassurance. Like, you're doing a good job, Nicole. It's finished. It's done. All of that stuff, it's done. It's over. Like, your son is not going to live the life that you lived, or you're his dad, it's over. And so now, seeing where he's at and seeing the relationship that he has with my husband, it's beautiful, and I'm so blessed that he has my husband to be there, to guide him, to read the word with him, to pray with him. Like, there's things that my husband does with him that I can't, and I think you've even talked about this, right? Where it's like, as moms and women, there's only... I don't want to say only so much, but there's certain things that we can do and there's certain things we can't. My son's at that age now. It was like God just orchestrated this perfectly, where he knew, he's at this age where he needs that male figure, right? And my husband is amazing with him. And so I thank God for that. Even though my son had to go through all of that, now he's in this place where he's safe.
Yeah, I think... it's the mother's job to raise a boy from baby through boyhood. And it's the dad's job to raise him from boyhood to manhood.
Yes.
It's that's the order. That's the correct order. And I'm not knocking single mothers out there, because they do a fabulous job. But the reality is, you recognized it. There's certain things that and parts of him that you can't touch.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I've talked about this with Cam. His mom calls him. It's different, right? I call him when he was little. It's different.
Yes.
It's way different. It's the dad voice. You know what I mean? And so I think him having that opportunity with Anthony Champ, I know he likes to be called Anthony now. I always call him Tone, Little Tone, but I can't call him that no more. Having that relationship, and that was a godsend. And speaking of your husband, Champ, word on the street is you slid into his DMs after you seen him on the podcast. Is that true?
No, that's not true.
That is not true?
No. He wants people to believe that, because he was the creeper, not me.
This is what I hear, man. The podcast is moving in throughout, God's using the podcast in miraculous ways, and kind of like I'm Chuck Woolery, you know, and I'm bringing people together here, and you've seen his awesome testimony on the podcast and the way I orchestrated that, and somehow God touched your heart, and then you just happen to slide in the DMs. Is that true?
A little bit of it is
okay.
true.
Okay,
a little bit.
Thank you
Yes.
for acknowledging the podcast and how God uses this podcast.
Yes.
Okay, what's your side of the story, Nicole?
Oh geez. So we had met.
And the weird thing is this: is you guys are Whittier people.
Yeah. So we met years ago.
Okay.
Mutual friends.
Because you're crazy Whittier people, you know what I mean? So you guys I would think that you guys have met before, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were both crazy at one point, around crazy people. But the last time I remember seeing him, we were at a bar in Whittier. There was a group of us, and I remember thinking, like, dang, this guy's messed up, right? Like, he can barely keep his eyes open. And I'm like, okay. Didn't really think anything of it, you know what I mean? Flash forward, that was like, what, 2019? I want to say 2018, 2019, something like that. And so 2022, I had a situation happen at a bar that ultimately brought me to my knees, surrendered, went back to church, signed up for baptism. Like,
good.
I was done. I was bloody knuckled, tears, like, Lord, I am done. I don't want to ever be with another man in my life. I don't care if I have to sit in my room every day, as long as I have you and my son and my family, I'm good. Like, it scared me so bad. So I had just signed up for baptism, and I don't know, it was a couple days later, I went out with one of my girlfriends who he knows, and she posted a picture of us. And so my page at the time was public, and I start seeing all these likes and likes and likes. And I'm like, who is this guy? And so I go and I see it, and I'm like, oh, this is that guy. Like, and he had just got baptized. So I'm like, what are the odds of this, you know? And so we kind of started talking, and it was like a few weeks before the podcast.
Did you ask yourself, did he really get baptized? You know what I mean? If he's liking all your pictures, Nicole, that's going to be a red flag right there. You know what I mean? I mean, it was... Maybe it was a process.
Yeah,
you know what
yeah.
I mean? For both of you, it was a process. All right, I'll give you a chance. It turned out good.
Yeah. So we started talking, and then...
But did you slide into his DMs? That's what I want to know.
I did.
Okay, but he liked all your pictures first.
Yes.
Okay, so he's not telling the whole.
it.
He's not telling the whole story here. It sounds good, like, oh, she slid into my DMs,
Yeah.
but he's not telling the story that he liked all your pictures first. That's a little bit different.
Yeah.
That gives the girl the right to slide into your DMs.
And what's crazy is normally I would never do that, right? I would never do that. But I remember being so, like, in awe. I remember seeing the picture of him being baptized, and I'm like, what the heck?
So you get transformed,
Yeah.
right? Finally surrender. That's it. It's done. I'm giving it all now, Lord. And then you see him, which you kind of knew the circles he ran with, and you're like, okay, is this for real?
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember just like, oh my gosh, you know? And so I messaged him, and I was like, hey, I don't know if you remember me, right? Because the last time I saw him, like I said, he was like on another planet. But I literally just signed up for baptism. I saw you just got baptized. Like, it's crazy, you know, it's beautiful to see what God's doing in your life. And so we kind of just started going back and forth. And then I think it was like a week or two later, you aired the podcast, and he was like, hey, check this out, you know? And so I started listening to it, and it was long. So I remember I listened to half of it, and the other half, I was in Target. I will never forget this. I was in Target in the clothing section, and he started talking about his dad and the passing of his dad. And I was just a mess. Tears just running down my face. And at this point, I didn't really know much about him. I didn't know his situation with his past, with his family, none of it. You know, I just knew him from social settings, which is very surface. And so I felt like that podcast really opened a gate of like, wow, like even though maybe our circumstances were different, like a lot of the pain was the same. A lot of the rejection, the abandonment, whatever it was the same, right? And I remember like always most of the guys that I would date after I got clean, none of them could ever relate to the things that I went through, right? If anything, a lot of them were like, ugh, like, you used to use meth, you know? And so I remember thinking like, wow, this guy, like, he gets it, you know? And so from there, I was more open to conversating with him because I felt like, okay, he's been in some of the ugly places that I've been. He's obviously been transformed, saved, surrendered. And so we just kept talking, and I remember he kept inviting me to his Connect group, and I'm like, I don't want to go to your Connect group, right?
You already had your church.
I already had my church.
Yeah.
I was good.
Yeah.
And then, well, I thought.
So you were going to like a uppity bougie church, and you were like, why do you want to go to Reach in Paramount, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to go down there.
Yeah. Well, and the congregation
Back to the hood?
Yeah, the congregation that I came from,
I love them over there.
it was huge, you know?
Right.
So going from this huge church, obviously that operates very differently, I was like, no, like, I'm good.
It's
you
tough.
know?
It's tough. You get comfortable for
Yeah.
sure.
It was an adjustment,
Yeah.
you know, and every church that I had been into prior was nothing like Reach, right? And so when he first asked me to his Connect group, I'm like, finally one night I was like, what else am I going to do on a Friday night? So I agreed. I went, and I loved it. Everybody was so welcoming. Everybody was so friendly, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is cool. And then pretty soon we had the conversation where he's like, well, if we're really going to date and ultimately, like, we're not wasting time, like, you have to go where I go. You know, the woman follows the man. And I'm like, not here, buddy. Not happening.
So granted, he's probably doing the right thing, right? It is the right thing. But you, as a woman that's been burned multiple times, like, this fool's not telling me where to go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
Not fool, but you know.
But I remember I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch it online first. I'm going to see how it is online, get a feel for it, and then we'll go from there. And so I watched it online, and the worship came on, and I was totally taken aback.
The music again, right?
The music again. Like, if you want me to like anything, put on some good music, and I'm sold. My first tattoo, he always makes fun of it, is music notes down my back. I got it in a crack motel out of a suitcase. The guy had a suitcase thing, you know.
Every white girl's favorite tattoo.
Yeah, right? Yeah, yeah. But that's, music is my thing, you know, and the church that I was going to, they had good worship, right? It wasn't bad. But when I heard the worship at Reach, I was like, whoa. Like, this is what I've always wanted. I've always craved this.
Yeah.
And then Pastor Omar came on, and obviously after that, I was like,
great preacher.
I'm good. Yeah. And a lot of his preaching style is very similar to my old pastor. So I felt like right there, I was like, I'm good. I'm in a good place, right? And so I went with him one Sunday, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Gavin had kind of a hard time because he had just kind of gotten rooted at our old church. He had made friends. He was going to start doing like the kids
bigger program,
media.
right?
Yeah. I mean, the way they have it there is just crazy, but it's a bigger church, you know? So it took him a while to adjust. But now, I mean, he will get mad at us if we miss church. It's a whole thing. Yeah. Where I'm like, I'm scared to tell him, like, we're not going to church tonight, you know, because he just like, no, I gotta go to church. Can you find me a ride? You know? So
was there any red flags because you both used at one time? Did you have any like hesitation there? Like, I don't know if this is a good idea. I tried this before, and I know he's saved and delivered, but he used to, and I had a problem too. Is there any red flags, or no?
No, and I think, as cliche as it sounds, like that whole like, when you know, you know. I just, from the very beginning, our very first date, I just knew, right? And I felt safe, and I've never felt safe with any man, ever. And it was almost like this weird comfortability. Like, I'm comfortable, but like, why am I comfortable? And then after that, I remember, like, we were both in the beginning, we were both praying, like, separately, like, Lord, if this is not of you, take it away.
Right.
And God was just like, no, I'm going to show you. Like, and it was just boom, 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 boom from there, you know? And even now, I mean, we've only been together for like a year and a half, and God has just opened so many doors that it's like, again, in and of ourselves, we could never do that, right? And so it was just confirmation after confirmation that the Lord was like, no, this is from me, you know? And on my end, I felt like that final surrender of me crying out, like, you know what, Lord, I'm done. It was almost like I could hear him saying, like, finally, Nicole, finally. Like, I already met you in that garage. Why didn't you stay with me? You know, why did you go back out there? You know, and from that point forward, I can't even tell you the blessings that have come from that, and over of God just reminding me, like, you deserve this. This is what you've always deserved, but I've been waiting for you to give it to me, you know?
It's so crazy you say that, because I've been on this trip of being, you know, the Beatitudes, and the first one is being poor in spirit. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, I really was like focused on that the last few weeks. I've been talking like this. I've been telling Melissa this like every day I've been running into this. And it's crazy that you say that, because, you know, to be poor in spirit every day, that means not just when we're in the garage at the lowest point, but when we're doing good.
Yeah.
When things are going together, I'm still need to be poor in spirit. I still need to recognize that I have insufficient funds in my spiritual bank account
Every day.
right? And I was like, that's where I want to be. Like, I can't wake up unless I pray.
Yeah.
I can't wake up unless I talk to God. I can't wake up and not want to read, or not want to do what's right, or not want to check my thoughts, or not want to check what I'm listening to. Like, Lord, I want to be insufficient, because when I am insufficient, then I am totally dependent on Him.
You. Yeah.
And that's it.
Yep. Yeah, totally. Every day. And that's, my husband and I talk about this all the time, because we both, even though we wake up at different times, we both wake up and we read and pray every day, you know? And granted, there's days where it doesn't happen, and those days that it doesn't happen, you can tell it didn't happen, you know?
Yeah.
And we both pray too. Like, I don't ever want to get to a place where I'm so comfortable that I forget where God's brought me from, right? And so, again, being poor in spirit every day, and being reminded, like, in my flesh, I'm worth nothing, you know? And constantly praying, like, God, just help me to be more like you and less like me. Yeah. Like, I don't want to be like Nicole, you know? I want to be like Christ. Yeah, and just every day denying that.
That's
flesh.
crazy, huh?
Yeah.
So you bring Champ around your family.
Yeah.
Big heart out there, loving guy, but the exterior is a little rough.
Yeah.
And what are they thinking?
Yeah.
And I only say that because I'm sure when he brought you around, you're a beautiful woman. You don't look like you were on meth for 4 years and doing drive-bys and in garages and walking the streets barefoot. Right? You don't look that way. I was like, she doesn't look. I remember Melissa told me, oh, she's a little gangster. I was talking to her. Yeah, I like her. And I was like, she's gangster?
You're like, no way.
I was like, no, she's not. And I think we laughed about this when we went out to eat the other day, right? And I was like, you don't look like a person that I would say is on drugs, but he does. He's rough. It used to be Uncle Louie was the roughest looking. That's probably Champ.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
you bring him around, and are they like eyebrows up, or what are they saying? Because once you get to talk to him and get to know him, you know he's a great guy.
Yeah. My family, most of them, I think, if not all of them, they're not really judgmental. I am the only person in my family that has a biracial kid. Everybody's white. So I think me bringing him around, they weren't too shocked, right? I think if it was one of my cousins bringing somebody like that around, they would have been like, what's happening, you know? But they all know my past. And I think like that, just getting to know him and who he is, they love him to death, especially my mom. She's constantly like spoiling him, buying him things. I'm like, oh gosh.
It's great to have a good mother-in-law.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. So you guys get married. I was there. Beautiful ceremony.
Thank you.
Great ceremony. I mean, it was just Champ's come so far, and to see you guys married and happy, we had a great time. It was fun. But how is life married after the honeymoon? You know, after Hawaii and all these not, you know, and when you really have to settle down and Champ has to be a father, and you got to be a wife, and you're trying to make this family work, because now it's a whole different ballgame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, in the beginning, it was an adjustment. It was a really big adjustment. Right after our wedding, I got COVID really bad. He was out of state working in Arizona. So it was like right off the bat. I mean, literally, we just got married, and it was like boom, 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 you know, all these hurdles. But I would say the first few months, it was a lot of adjusting, a lot of getting used to each other's personalities. Again, we had bought a house, but I wasn't living in it until we were married, which great, right? Beautiful. But again, all this time has gone by, and we've never actually lived with each other. So now we're with each other 24/7. And so it was just getting used to that and adapting to our quirks, our personalities, what things upset you, what don't you like.
Typical stuff.
Yeah, typical stuff. And then obviously throwing Gavin in there, and he's done a great job at like navigating through parenting. And there's days where I'm like, he's really hard on himself, and I'm like, you need to give yourself grace, because you've never been a dad, you know, and now overnight you're a dad to a 10, 11-year-old. That's a lot. You know, I try to put myself in his shoes sometimes, and I'm like, if this was the other way around, I'd probably be going crazy, you know, but he's done a really good job at like being there for Gavin, and just learning to be patient and give Gavin grace, you know, because Gavin's going through it too. So
the plus for Champ is he had a great dad.
Yeah.
That loved him, showed him. So I think me and him talked about that a few times, and I was like, hey man, what would your dad do? You know what I mean? And it's pretty like, and then sometimes he's like, my dad would have smacked me in the back of the head. And I'm laughing. And I was like, not that part of your dad. Yeah. What about the loving dad that comes and talks to you and prays with you? And so, you know, and I'm the same way. You know, you think about, you know, okay, well, what did my dad do? What did I like and what I didn't like? You know, or how can I improve upon my dad? You know what I mean? I think that's the goal for us. You know what I mean? You said the curse is broken for your son. And I think as fathers, you know, we become fathers, and I think we can easily look at, my dad didn't do this or my dad didn't do that. But I try to look at, okay, how can I improve? What I didn't like, let me improve upon that. And what I did like, yeah, great, I'll take that too. You know what I mean? I think that's the plus to, so every generation gets a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I see Gavin, and he has, you know, Granny Apples over there, and Auntie Apples, his grandma, and I'm like, oh, she's just loving that. You know what I mean? Which is great. So I think what a great connection. And how does your life turn out like this?
God, that's it. You know, that's why I tell people, I'm like, there's days where I trip out, like I'll take Gavin to school. He's obviously at work, and I'm at home, and I'm looking around our house like, whoa, it's crazy.
Because you guys Champ drives a nice car. I don't know what kind of car he has, but I know he has a nice ride. You have your house, beautiful dog, a son, and a home. You guys are involved in your church. What shouldn't have been is now happening. Yeah.
And it's crazy. I remember this. So I turned 33. And I remember now, obviously knowing that it was God, but just this thought of when you turn 37, you're gonna then enter the best years of your life. And every birthday after my 33rd birthday, I would be excited for the next year because I'd be closer to 37, and I could never understand why. Why that age? Why that number? What's gonna happen? I had no clue. I turned 37 last November, and we got engaged like 2 weeks before I turned 37.
Wow.
And then from there, you know, we get engaged 3 months later, we're married. We bought a house 2.5, 3 months after dating. Like, that just doesn't happen by itself.
Not for two people on drugs from Whittier.
No. You know?
It just doesn't go down like that.
And not only that, but we bought a house when the market was insane. Like, people couldn't, you couldn't buy a house if you had the cash for it. You know what I mean? And not only that, but we're in East Whittier where it's like nice. We're tucked in this nice, cute little community. People walk by and they're waving, walking their dogs, and it's just nice, you know? And I'm like, I look around and I'm like, God, you are so good. You are so good because I deserve none of this, right? But the Lord is like, no, you do, Nicole. You do. So I'm going to bless you, you know? And I truly believe that, like, our obedience and, like, us putting God first and foremost, individually and together in our marriage, that has played a big role too, you know? And that's something that I wish I would have known earlier on in life, right? Like, how to be obedient to God. And sleeping around is not that, you know? And so when we first started dating, that was a conversation we had. Like, we're not willing to compromise. Like, he had gotten baptized, I had gotten baptized. It was a serious thing. Like, it wasn't just me being dunked underwater for me to come back up and go back to living how I was living. Like, we didn't kiss until our wedding day, you know, because we didn't want that temptation of those thoughts and those feelings of things that weren't godly, right? And so we waited, and a lot of people didn't understand that, but I truly believe that now this place that God has brought us from is a direct result of that, right? And so I always share that with people, like, just stay obedient to the Lord and watch what he does, you know, because it's wild.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. So crazy.
And then you have your own business.
Yeah, which that has been, you know, just like anything, an uphill battle for sure. But again, a blessing, right? Like, to come from where I've come from to now, like, I make my own schedule. I can pick and choose what clients I want to take. I can take off as much time as I want to take off. Like, it's beautiful.
From a beauty school dropout,
Yeah,
drinking,
yeah,
to owning your own salon.
yeah,
I mean, it's got to be God. When I look at Champ, it's God.
yeah,
You know what I mean? It's, and we could, you know, people always say, I wish, you know, you said you wish. I just think that everybody has it's their time. And then we all could say, we wish we did this, we wish we did that. But I think within God's time, and God, of course, always goes, I told you. And he's the only one that can really say that, right? He's the only one that can really say, I told you.
yeah.
But in the end, I think it all works out for the best when we finally surrender to God.
Yeah, that's it. That is it. Because, I mean, like that, I had that encounter, right? And after that, I was clean and sober for 4 years. And then little by little, I started drinking. And in those times that I was drinking, I was going to church. I would go to church on Sunday morning, and then I'd go to the bar right after. You know, Wednesday, sometimes I would go, sometimes I wouldn't. But I thought it was okay. I thought it was okay for me to be in the bar and be mingling and doing all these things and then going to church. I was still saved, you know? But it's like I wasn't surrendered.
Right.
My life was not, I was not surrendering.
Your life was still your own.
Yeah.
Not God's.
I was still running on self-will. I was still doing what Nicole wanted to do, you know? And ultimately, time and time again, there were so many destructive moments where there was a point where I was smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day for like 15 years, right? And I remember one day I had been drinking all day, and I was on like almost 3 packs of cigarettes in a matter of like 9 hours, and I fainted. I fainted at my friend's house, and from that point forward, I was like, okay, I'm done smoking cigarettes, but I continued to drink. You know, and it was like, that's how I lived my life for so long. Like, well, I'll cut this out. I'll get rid of this. It was never me fully surrendering everything. You know, like, God, I don't want this anymore. I don't want it because without you, I'm nothing and I'm miserable. You know, and it was like that moment that I actually surrendered. My life has been so beautiful, so fruitful, so blessed, happy, like pure happiness, not fake, not me putting on a mask, like to show everybody like, oh, I'm fine. You know, like this is genuine, you know, and that doesn't come from anywhere else but God. Doesn't.
So good. What a great story.
Thanks.
I appreciate you coming out.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking me.
I really enjoyed getting to know you. I mean, you're part of the family now.
Yeah.
Sit.
You're stuck with me now.
I know. Better you than Champ.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
What's your advice to women, let's say a single mother out there, or anybody that's just struggling and not willing to surrender it all to God? What is your advice to them?
Definitely get with women who are going to pray for you, who are going to hold you accountable. I think that's been a huge thing in my walk with God. I never had that before, right? So even in moments when I do struggle, because I do still struggle, I know I have a grip of females that I could call at all hours of the night, and they're going to be like, all right, sis, I'm going to pray for you. Let's pray. Or they're going to call me in the morning, hey, how are you doing? Do you need me to come over? Let's go to lunch. You know what I mean? And keeping women in your circle who are walking the path of God. They're not out at bars. They're not drinking. They're not sleeping with a different dude every weekend. Like, getting rid of all of that and just allowing God the space in your life to bring the people in that he wants to be there. And for single mothers, like, don't look for love. You know, I remember so many times trying to look for this perfect man and this perfect dad for my son, and it never worked out because, again, I was running on self-will, you know. So just allowing God to just fully come in and just giving him everything, you know, letting go of all of that expectation and all of your wants and needs and allowing him to orchestrate every little detail of your life, and it'll blow your mind. You know, it'll really blow your mind.
So good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, me and Cam do one more thing.
No.
Yeah, we do one more thing before it's called the Furious 5.
Oh, jeez.
And we ask you 5 furious questions.
Okay.
Okay? Very easy. Okay? Question number 1 on the Street Gospel Furious 5. What is, as a salon owner, what is your biggest pet peeve with your clients?
When they don't sit still.
When they don't sit still.
So I have a lot of clients.
For guys, I see that. For women, you know, their hair's whatever. It doesn't matter. They can move a little bit, but what does that do?
I have some clients where I will literally be taking a section of their hair and they can't talk without moving their head. And so I'm like trying to weave and trying to get the section, you know, and I'm like, I'm getting dizzy just trying to keep up with their hair. And that's probably my biggest pet peeve for sure, is just them not being able to sit still.
All right. Question number 2 on the Street Gospel Furious 5. Word on the street is that you used to be a hooper.
Yeah, I did.
Really?
Yeah.
You were a baller.
From 6th grade until my senior year of high school, I had to quit because I was in a really bad car accident, which that ultimately led to other things too. But yeah, every female in my family except my mom all played basketball.
What position did you play?
Point guard or forward.
Point guard.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So you got a little bit of handles.
Yeah. Well, not now.
So when you see Gavin, you're probably giving him more pointers than Champ is then.
No, Champ does really well with him, but I will take credit for like his initial start in basketball. You know, I would be the one out there playing with him and taking him to practice and signing him up and all of those things. And just instilling kind of confidence in him, you know, and boosting him up. But Champ does the dirty work now.
All right. Coach Champ.
Yeah.
Question number 3 on the Street Gospel Furious 5. What does Champ like to eat, and what do you cook for him?
What does he like to eat? He's a snacker. So Champ is a big snacker. He loves to graze. Like, we'll have food in the fridge, and he will be in the pantry eating the chips and the cookies and the candy and all the things.
That's me too.
Yeah.
Do you cook for him?
I try my best to cook. It's a little crazy with work, but we kind of go hand in hand. Like, some days I'll cook, some days he'll cook.
Does he like your cooking?
Yeah,
okay,
I think
good,
so.
Good.
You? He said yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she's like, yeah, I make great sandwiches. That was one thing. Melissa, she only had to cook like two things, and I was fine with that. You know what I mean? It was like, okay, if you cook these two things, we're good.
Yeah.
I'll live with you. We're fine. So that's good.
Yeah. No, we usually will make it work. Sometimes I'll meal prep for the week just because I know it's going to be crazy. Like if we're like right now with the holidays, it's crazy for me. So I try to meal prep, have stuff ready in the fridge. That way it's easy for both of us. Just grab it, warm it up. You know, and there's other days where I'll actually cook. There's days where he'll barbecue. So we just kind of work from there.
Okay. Question number 4. What is a hobby that you do that nobody knows?
Take a lot of naps.
Oh, you're a napper. So we got a grazer and a napper. This sounds like a fun house here, man.
Yeah, I would say that, or I mean, not so much going to the gym lately, but I do love going to the gym. That too.
Okay. Naps.
Yeah, naps.
I wish I had time for naps.
I know. I try, like, if I have a long day, if I have a gap in between my clients, I'll go lay down for like 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Those are great naps.
Yeah.
You know, the key is to have your feet elevated above your body.
Yes. I have to because I'm on my feet all day. So I'm like,
So even if you sleep for 10 minutes, they say if your feet are above your the rest of your body, it's going to feel like you rested like for 30 minutes.
Interesting.
Yeah. I read that.
That's good.
So I haven't really tried it too much because there's nowhere really to do that around here. Last question of the Street Gospel Furious 5. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Praying for a baby. So hopefully a baby somewhere in those years. Honestly, like, I'm where I want to be right now, you know, so other than obviously being a mom again would be a huge blessing. But yeah, I mean, we have the house. I have my business. He's very well off at his job. We're happy. I mean, it doesn't really get better than that, you know?
So good.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming out, Nicole.
Thanks.
What a great story.
Thanks, cousin.
Cousin Nicole. Yeah, and thanks for taking taking him on, because I don't know if there was a woman out there for him. You know what I mean?
Apples always tells me, I'm so glad he's yours now.
I'm gonna put him on the spot right now. So, and I'm laughing at this one because I totally got him, because I remember he was telling me they wanted to have. I'm gonna get him right now, because we're like each other in this way, and I'm not gonna lie, and I know you're like Melissa in this way too. So we were talking one day, and he started telling me they want to have a small group, connect group at the house, and I, now that you're settled down, you're a little bit older. Like when we were young, connect group at the house, it was fun. So then I was like, man, look, champ, if you don't want to do it, I get it. Just tell them you don't want to do it. And I think it was about 3 weeks later, and I see Champ leading the connect group at the house. And I was like, what happened? And I was like, I felt bad. Like I'm over here giving them bad advice. Like, hey, if you don't want to do it, just be honest with them. Tell them you don't want them, let's do it at somebody else's house. I go, that's what I would do. 3 weeks later, he's up there. Yeah. I'm like, what the heck? What happened here? What happened?
He did so good too. I was so proud of him. I think it was just a lot to take on. You know what I mean? And I think we both can agree that like God, our house is just set up for that. It's set up for people.
I know. When I see the videos, I'm like, this is a pretty wide area right here. It's like perfect Bible study house, connect group house.
Yes. Like, gatherings, yes. Like fellowship. Yeah. And I really believe like God blessed us with that house for a purpose, and we had been praying about it, and he was kind of hesitant, I think just because maybe insecurity or doubt within himself, but I was so proud of him. And like that first night, you could tell he was a little nervous. He did great. And then the second week, he just blew me away. I remember I was sitting there and I'm just like watching him teach, and I'm like, that's my husband.
Nice.
You know, like, I'm so proud of him because I know he kind of fought through that. Like, am I ready? Am I capable? Are people going to look at me and think I'm not good enough, or I haven't been saved long enough? Like, all of those things were going through his mind, you know? And then on top of that, you have 60 people in your house wrecking everything. The kids are maniacs, you know, but it was beautiful, and so I'm glad that he said yes at the end.
I'm glad he said yes too. I mean, it's a good thing, and I always tell couples, me must always tell them it's a great thing to serve together, to do something together. Obviously, you probably do some stuff separately, but to do something together, it just brings you closer to the Lord. It brings you closer to the Lord together. So I think it's a great thing.
Yes, that's how it is. We both serve in the kids ministry at church together. Fun stuff.
Appreciate you coming out.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you everybody out there. We appreciate you. Be sure to tune in to the Street Gospel Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, every podcast platform. Share it with your friends. We love you. We're out. Peace.